My father's name was Joseph Harold Felter, Jr. And he comes from a family of service. His father was a career officer, so then my father followed his father. And my father, being the oldest of 9, went to Norwich Military Academy, and then was sent to Germany, and then shortly after there, he went to Vietnam. He was air defense artillery. I mean, his whole life was committed to air defense artillery because that's what his father did. He was bigger than life. He definitely was bigger than life. He was a tough guy, really tough guy. Very proud to say he was a Rhodes Scholar nominee from New England. He was an incredible writer. He was matinee handsome, and he had a big personality, but he was wicked smart. Wicked smart. Yeah, that photograph, I think it's my father at his purest, but he was 26 years old. There was just a promise in that picture. Well, he had it all. He was educated, he was handsome, he was an alpha male, he had married the debutante, he had the 2 kids. I mean, it was kind of at the height of where it's all ahead of you. And I do believe that his experience in Vietnam changed him. It changed him. So I think one of the best things I've ever heard about war is that there's nothing normal about war. So you put people into a situation and they're expected to normalize it when there's nothing normal. And I was reading some of my father's letters this morning. January 8th, 1968, this is right after he got there. And he says, "Dearest Missy, we had a little bit of excitement tonight, but I really don't feel like writing about it. I'm sure that you are getting tired of my war stories. I'm even getting tired of being shot at." So he was there in '68 during the Tet Offensive.
If you had to choose the most important event of the Vietnam War, it certainly would be the Tet Offensive.
So he was there, and he talks about in his letters and how intense things were getting. And how the brutality of Vietnam was getting at an all-time high. July 1968, okay. Okay, so this was July 25th, 1968. Sorry I can't say too much about what's going on, ... I'm not trying to be an alarmist, but things are serious. They're as serious as you might imagine from reading the newspapers. And as the letters continue on, it just devolves in terms of the seriousness. This is the 29th of November, 1968. He said, "I had my first real taste of this war and all of its brutal reality." He was making a real point to communicate home what was going on in a way that it might be his last letter. It seemed like he was really going into his psyche and how this was impacting and changing him. It seems like month by month by month, he gets more and more disillusioned. And there was a particular day that he wrote to my mother about his driver. And he had spent a tremendous amount of time with his driver in this Jeep. They were very close. The driver had 5 children. They always talked about their families. They always talked about what they were going to do when they were going to get back. And you know, the relationships and the bonds in a conflict or in war, we all know, are unbreakable. So he had one of those bonds with his driver. And on one occasion, on this one particular day, and I think it was Thanksgiving Day, they were driving and the driver was shot, and he talked about his head resting in my father's lap and how that I think that was the moment he really changed.
To learn what is on the minds of the men we ask to do our fighting for us, a 60 Minutes crew flew back home with men who had served in Vietnam to see what effect that year had had on them. And now they are home.
When he got back, what I remember profoundly was that everybody we were surrounded by had just gotten back from the war. Everybody had fought in the war, so they talked about it all the time. It was kind of infused in our household, what happened in Vietnam. I think my experience of service, there was a whole arc of disillusionment with how people in the service were treated. So that was disillusioning, and so I didn't see a lot of female role models in the military when I was growing up. But interestingly enough, my father was dead set on the idea that everybody should serve, do some kind of service to country for 2 years. no matter what capacity, whether it's in the military, they should understand service to country. And so I went into ROTC, and I didn't see a pathway for me. So I did not serve. I got out before I had to serve. I didn't feel guilty. However, there's something that happens to me every time, anytime I deal with anybody who's in uniform. There's something that I can't articulate. It's visceral. I would do anything to make sure they're just a little more comfortable, like a lot of us. And there's a role there to be played. I would say the one takeaway that I had from growing up in a service family is I don't feel really actualized unless I am supporting or serving. So as an attorney, I tried to feel that actualization as much as I could in helping people, defending them or getting their rights protected, validated. But quite by accident, I got into the nonprofit world. So at the height of the global war on terror in the early 2000s, we would come down from New York City to visit Walter Reed. We were guests of the USO. So that's when I really became aware of what the USO does. And when I relocated to Washington, D.C., and there was an opportunity to apply for the executive director of that very same USO that I had come down to from New York, I jumped on it.
Yeah.
Hello, Jerry Sr. I'm Lisa Marie Riggins. Welcome to Washington.
She did a lot to organize our day today.
She did everything,
Yeah.
aside from the
Thank
plane.
you so much.
And that was about 3.5 years ago, and I would say I hit the ground running, and I have not stopped. These are my people. This is my world. This is my family. There is nothing about it that doesn't resonate with me, whether it's a military spouse who is my mom, whether it's the dependents who are me and my brothers and sisters, and certainly the active duty service members and the single service members who are my nephews and my cousins, and were my brother who is 11 months younger than me. So the whole ecosystem, in a weird way, I've come all the way back home. Ironically, my office is on Fort Myer, and I lived on Fort Myer in the 2nd grade, and that's where we lived right after my father got back from Vietnam, and he was the deputy XO for General Westmoreland. And I'm back there today. I'm right, the house is still there. From my own personal perspective, I'm a soldier's daughter. I'm the daughter of a soldier who came from a generation where it was very difficult to show vulnerability or maybe be a father to a daughter. And my father had all the attributes that I could stand back from and only hope to have some of his best. If I just had a glimmer of his charisma or his intensity or his tenacity or his work ethic. So when I think about Arlington, visiting him in Arlington, there's a mixture of regret for him that he wasn't able to experience a family fully emotionally, because he really was dedicated to being a soldier. To be that person in those letters and deal with what was happening that's not normal. I think we ask a lot psychologically of our warriors. And so I have compassion for that. And I think as a culture, we're being much more aware and patient and supportive. My father missed that. So I have a lot of compassion for him. And the best thing I can do is, for his memory, is to try and keep taking care of his soldiers.